and augmented with foreign talent. And that has been Singapore's priority all the time, in the past, in the present, and definitely also into the future. When many third world countries were asking for handouts, Singapore asked for support and funding related in talent development. We think that is the most effective, the most sustainable economic development strategy. And when we were poorer with limited funds, we relied essentially on friendly countries like Australia. So Colombo Plan and some other scholarships came in extremely handy. Later on, with better economic growth, as we accumulated a little bit more funds, we decided to set aside a significant part of our own budget on education and on talent development. And then much later, as we accumulated even more funding, we decided to reciprocate, and we had our own equivalent of the Colombo Plan through, for example, ASEAN Scholarship to help residents in our neighboring region, as well as some other arrangements to help residents coming from further afield, like China, India, and Africa. And the same arrangement you can see, for example, in my sector in healthcare. And when we first started, for example, in heart bypass surgery, we benefited a lot from the late Dr. Victor Cheng of St. Vincent's Hospital, Sydney, and some of our best heart surgeons were all trained by him at that time. And in time, as we picked up our own skills, my own heart surgeon now, he spent a lot of time in Vietnam and in parts of China, teaching the new generation of heart surgeons in China. And I think this is how things ought to be. We regard talent development really as the most sustainable economic development strategy. We believe it is fundamentally. If we look at ancient Chinese philosophy, we have always emphasized education, and hence the Chinese saying, 10 years to grow a tree, a century to prepare a person. Not that in ancient time people lived more than 100 years, but more to emphasize the long-term nature of this venture. I grew up in Malaysia since birth all the way up to the age of 20, and then the following 5 years, as a result of Colombo Plan, stayed in Australia. And those were extremely memorable times at the age of very impressionable age. And when I left Australia, many deep impressions of that beautiful period in Australia. And I'll just mention a few of those impressions. The first impression was what a lucky country yours is, resources aplenty. And second, very powerful union. Job demarcation. As one of the modules in our course, we also studied industrial law, and a lot of time was spent talking about job demarcation, how important it is. And I'm quite sure things are very different now. The union probably have learned from Singapore Union on how to do things together. Third, it was a period of the fall of Saigon. That was the second year of my university course, and fellow classmates of Vietnam, all of a sudden the country was lost, and relationship, communication cut off from the family, and of course, uncertainty, desperations. But again, Australian generosity, offering asylum, practically every one of them. In subsequent years, when I traveled to Australia, staying in some hotels, and I bumped into some of those Vietnamese refugees who were stuck, and in a way And as Vietnam, after Doi Moi, their own reforms, opened up the door for returning Vietnamese, they became useful again, and many went back and formed a very important bridge, economic bridge between Vietnam and Australia. So you see things move in strange ways that you can never predict. Another Chinese expression that "sai ong si ma." Sometimes you have a setback, but you never know that years later the setback turned out to be a blessing. A fourth very deep impression was the Medibank reform. This was the Gough-Whitlam period. Labour government was pushing through many bank reforms, and that was also my first, second, and third year of university course. And on hindsight, and I listened carefully to the TV debate and the newspaper commentaries, and turned out to be very useful backgrounder for me subsequently when I entered health ministry and had to undertake our own health reforms. Another impression was your opera house, beautiful opera house, and how it has to be funded. In the lottery, I didn't buy any, but some of our university mates bought, and one of them struck it rich, a Singaporean private student, and he kept it quiet, but he could not keep it too quiet because the next few days he was driving around campus in a brand new Mercedes. But above all, the deepest impression of Australia is the very friendly Australians. And throughout my 5-year stay, whether it is in the campus, in the hostel, in the neighborhood, when we move out to stay outside, or during vacation time, I work as casual worker in PHP, and all around we make many good friends. And these are the memories that I treasure. And as I returned to Singapore to serve my bond here, they became very useful reference, both at a personal level and in a professional area as inspiration to my work. And I was lucky that in my career, in my public service, I have many opportunities to continue to build on the relationship between our two countries. Both in APEC, as I was the Singapore APEC song leader for 7 years, and made many good friends from Australian Foreign and Trade Service, as well as PERMSEC of NTI, forums like the World Trade Organizations, because we hosted the first WTO ministerial conference here. And now as a health minister in the World Health Organization. And both in good times and in bad times, during the H1N1, the biggest supply of H1N1 flu vaccine came from Australia. Very special arrangement that we made well before the crisis, and the commitment was, of course, we have to meet the needs of Australia first, but after Australia it will be Singapore. And that was how we got our supply of vaccine, and we continue on with that professional relationship. And it wasn't difficult at all for me working with Australia to meet national interests, because often both our national interests coincide. We are really like-minded in almost every issue: free trade, open economy, protect the environment, food safety, high medical standards. And I'll continue to do my part to strengthen bilateral relations. Finally, there are many Australian alumni in Singapore, and I'm very proud to be one. I'm deeply honored by the award, and I'll treasure it all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khaw.